Jim met with Beyond Stillness 9 times to articulate and publicly share this story of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope. This interview was recorded during our final meeting together. To learn more about our programs, services, or to sponsor a guest on their story crafting journey, please visit www.beyondstillness.org. Today, we welcome guest Jim Dana, who takes us on an honest exploration of how a stroke nearly 3 decades ago reshaped his sense of self, guided by an inner voice that evolved over time. Jim shares how he learned to embrace honesty, vulnerability, and self-reflection to become who he calls Jim Dana version 2. Join us as he shares his journey navigating uninvited emotional outbursts, discovering unexpected gratitude, and choosing every day to grow into a better version of himself. Thank you for joining us for part 2, Jim Dana's interview.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke. Stroke offers a powerful, life-changing shift in perspective. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. Beyond Stillness offers a moment of pause for storytelling and reflection. Ultimately, we create a welcoming environment that reveres the moment beyond stroke's paralysis. Still moments unite humanity and divinity. I'm your host, Molly Bucola. As we begin today, we take a moment of pause to honor the way wisdom has emerged through recovery. And we give thanks. Now, Jim Dana's interview. Jim, thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been 29 years since your stroke. Your story specifically focuses on choice and change. How has your perspective on life changed over time?
I have to start by saying I think probably a big change in perspective came just recently from writing the story. It's certainly telling the story. It changed the way I organized what I've gone through. But obviously, everything started after my stroke by being about physical strength and mobility and getting back my voice so I could teach and go back to work. Then we gradually moved much more about the emotional side, and that was very gradual, but I think in many ways I was reacting to these occasional negative consequences of my outbursts, and they always would take people aback, and they weren't every day, so people were just surprised by them. So I was trying just not to be a bad person. I was trying to get help, and I wasn't thinking about who I was or my values or anything like that. And I eventually learned that controlling the behavior involved changing how I thought about my life. So there was a lot of conscious choice to do things that had, I think, this indirect effect. making me a better person. So learning to connect better with people, can earn their trust and not be too surprised when I started laughing inappropriately or crying or getting frustrated. That's something no one's going to take easily. But I did do my best. But anyway, at some point, I started thinking more and more about those changes being really fundamental, permanent. I don't think there are some of the changes that I could go back. But now I'm thinking about what comes next. I might retire and do more, trying to help people. So there's a lot of time ahead. I'll keep changing. I'm not going to stop changing.
Keep gauging and not going to stop changing. I love that. Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of self-awareness, and with that comes an opportunity to have a perspective on your own life and think, okay, how do I want to change? And one thing that I really admire about you is you often reflect on what has been and how you want to react or interact with others. In your story, when you're talking about driving on the road in Boston, you said not to react in frustration and anger because anger is giving up control.
It started by putting a little sticker on the horn. Do not push. I have to control more than that. But you do little things at first. Don't honk the horn. If I have to honk the horn, I use one finger.
That's a process, right? Acknowledging, last time I honked the horn, I'm not proud of myself. I'm going to create something that will make me second guess honking the horn next time. So it's the self-awareness and choosing each step of the way to become the Jim Dana version that you want to be. Going back to stroke recovery, it sounds like the first couple of years of recovery, you focused on the physical. And one thing you say in your story is that the emotional is a lifetime.
Yes. Well, it is because it's harder to change. And you don't give up on that change because acknowledging that you're changing to yourself and to other people is part of the recovery, not just getting stronger, but hey, I'm not perfect. I'm doing what I can. So you know more about what I'm going through and can relate a little better. It doesn't take you by surprise as much.
Yeah. Another thing that I admire about you is your honesty about the tough moments when you failed to be your best self. And with grace, you have either addressed it then, learned from it, looking back, and you said showing people that I am trying is important. I want them to know that I know I'm not perfect. How and why did you begin to choose vulnerability and openness?
I think that's really a learned behavior. I don't think I thought about it that way. I've actually read in books, people encouraging patients with emotional inability to be more open as a strategy. But I think I just wanted people to like me. I wanted them to be comfortable. And so I knew that I was occasionally going to laugh like I just did, and that would seem awkward. And I don't know how quickly I moved towards using humor, but I would guess that I started with self deprecating humor. just to make people aware of these imperfections. And then there was trial and error and learning. It's different with different people. If I'm talking to someone I've never met before, then I know that they have a totally different perspective than somebody in my classroom that sees that I'm disabled and sitting in a wheelchair. But the wheelchair means different things to different people, and they don't know that I've had a stroke or whether I have ALS or MS, and they don't know that it affects my emotions. So again, I just try different things with different people, and eventually, I think self-deprecating humor kind of evolved into openness with people, especially students and people I knew I would interact with more, or people that I was talking to in a stressful situation, particularly at work. I think it also early on helped that I thought people were eventually going to see the bad side. And so it was sort of natural to share that before it happened. And I was triggered to be more introspective. And being introspective makes all these things easier. So I think just understanding that openness worked.
Huh. You said being introspective makes all these things easier. Sometimes it's hard for people to be introspective because we're afraid of what we might find. So, how did you begin with the introspective process?
I think there's a couple of answers. One, I love teaching, and you can't be a good teacher without being introspective about your teaching. You have to try things and see what works for you, and it's different for other people. And I've had the benefit of people coming to my class that are trained, giving people feedback. So I've had lots of opportunity to be introspective about teaching even before my stroke. So maybe it came more natural to me. But with these incidents, these outbursts, one of the things that therapists recommended was we talk about the incidents and how they affected you or what you wish you had done differently. So I was just making lists of various outbursts, not just outbursts I was unhappy with, but emotions I was able to control. And that's got more common over time. But the success as well as the failures. And so making lists of what happened that month, that's a very simple kind of introspection.
Yeah. Making lists of the interactions and the feelings that came up and
And what I wish I had done differently.
yeah.
Right. So if I could rewrite what happened, I can't take away the feeling of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Pausing, taking more breaths, perhaps sitting closer to the door so I could excuse myself. I could even say I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, therapy has always been more about introspection, anyway.
Yeah.
Getting ready for it is half the value, at least. One thing I'll say about introspection is it's really important to do that when I'm calm.
Oh.
So I find a time that's appropriate. I don't try to be introspective when I'm upset. it's really useful to be a little calmer, more logical, to put various incidents in your life together and say, what's a strategy for coping with these kinds of problems rather than just be thinking about who you're mad at right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's setting ourselves up for success. It's like having a conversation with someone after a fight. You're like, I should have really waited to have this conversation until I was a little more calm. We're having a conversation with ourselves. So it makes sense.
Yes. I find those hard. Just you get emotional again very quickly.
Yeah.
I like not to have that happen. So my approach often is to figure out what I did wrong, apologize, and say what I'm going to do differently going forward as opposed to forcing people to talk to me.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing those lessons that we learn in kindergarten that are applicable our whole lives in every situation? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we step back a second? In your own words, I'd like to hear what PsuedoBulbar Affect is.
Yeah. So I knew it first as emotional lability. And then I became aware maybe 8 or 10 years after my stroke, after I had seen neurologists and had medications suggested and talked to a therapist about breathing and other relaxation methods. I became aware of the term PsuedoBulbar Affect, which describes emotional lability, which is really just any kind of relaxation of the ability to hold your emotions in. So people have feelings, but emotional lability is expressing those more physically, openly crying and laughing and pounding the table, whatever. So lots of people are good at holding those in. And as you get older, for example, everyone cries more. That's referred to as emotional lability. PsuedoBulbar Affect is a brain injury. So it's emotional lability caused by a stroke or by a physical brain injury or other diseases that affect the brain. And it's pretty common. I think 30% of stroke survivors have it, not always diagnosed. Often it seems people have it mildly. It seems kind of appropriate that they'd be sadder more often so you don't notice it as unusual.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for talking about that a little bit for us. At one point in your story, you said Jim Dana version 2 learned new and better ways to connect with students. How are you learning new and better ways to connect with people in general now?
It's something we all have to do, and it's really important. And I focus on always being a good listener, in particular, how to teach better and connect with students. Being a good listener. And I'm fortunate that that's something I can still do pretty well. And that means with students, making it clear you heard their question. So repeating it if you're not going to be able to answer it and connecting it to what other people said. So they know that you not only heard them, but you heard the people before you. So listening, which is a kind of respect. You're showing people respect when you show them that you listen, but You have to ask questions to get them to share things. Try to ask questions and follow up questions. And with friends, I make a point of trying to learn something new about them each time we talk.
Oh,
I'm not sure I'm conscious of that every time, but I actually take time when we have friends over, thinking about what I'm going to ask them to get to know them better before they come over.
that's a beautiful practice.
I learned that from my father. He talked about it all the time. And he was well liked, but he always asked questions and I think thought about what to ask people. He was trying to get to know.
Hmm.
But that's not unique to surviving a stroke. That's just what I got from my dad and from other role models and from books. I like this book by David Brooks, How to Know a Person, partly because it reinforces the things that I do well. But if you've had a stroke, it's harder if you have physical limits. It's harder to show enthusiasm with body language and march around the room. It's harder to find activities to share in common. So I have to get more creative, and that's a work in progress. But I go to a lot more of friends, kids' events, graduations, and concerts. So part of it is you just show up and be present. That works even if you've had a stroke. Unless you start crying in the audience. Sometimes that happens and I have to leave. But not that often.
You mentioned this isn't a stroke recovery thing, but for a lot of people, it's hard to connect or reconnect with people after their stroke. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's self-confidence too. And so going into situations with tools like thinking of questions
Yeah.
in advance or listening as deeply as possible and repeating to somebody else, or
Yeah.
just the process of simply showing up and being there is a gift to other people. These are all things that are tools that we can use post-stroke in order to connect or reconnect with others. Thank you for your lessons from your dad. I'm sure you have plenty of others to share with us. I would love to hear more and more about lessons from your dad because you are a mentor to many. And I'm sure that others have mentored you along the way to show you how it's done. Jim, you began by saying, looking backwards, I now understand that Jim Dana version 2 is a different person than Jim Dana version 1. You go on to share the many ways that you have chosen and worked towards who you want to become. When you look back now, what do you see as some of the most important choices or moments that have helped shape you, Jim Dana version 2, into who you are today?
There are a bunch of things that are clearly identifiable looking backwards. Talking to therapists was something I did now and then. And so I saw different people. And there was one who encouraged me to read a book about rational emotive therapy. And that moved me past thinking about just relaxing and diminishing my emotions to trying to change them. I'm not sure the book was that important, but just talking about the idea to me. And that didn't seem at the time like that big an event, but it just made me more introspective, thinking more about where those emotions were coming from and how I wish I felt at the time.
Yeah.
And emotions change over our lives. So you have some control over them. For example, we all have changed our sense of what's funny as social values change.
Yeah.
So we can change. That was important. I think church had a big role, and I'm not sure I know precisely. Uh, I think it was a whole bunch of things. It just encouraged introspection, encouraged thinking about values. But that's where I did various wellness programs and read books, including the book by Parker Palmer. So I think church was helpful. We got started on church because my wife promised God we'd go to church if I survived. But it fits me more than her.
Hmm.
We both like it, but we like it for the community and we like our jobs for the community too. But anyway, church has had a very positive effect on how I think about myself, but encouraging introspection. Yeah, there's a negative side to that, which is every time I do something really awful and hurt somebody by being overly angry and saying something inappropriate, that's what drives me back to getting more therapy. So those stand out.
Yeah.
Time I yelled at my son when he was a teenager, which I'm sure I'm not the only one who's done, but still, those negative moments get fixed in your brain.
Isn't it interesting? Our brains seem to attach to the negativity, even when we're surrounded by positivity. That one thing just eats at us.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can change it, but that seems like I spent all my time thinking about how I wish I could have done something differently that I can't do differently.
Well, and much of your story is about what we can change moving forward. And so, what I heard you saying about what has made you Jim Dana version 2, some of the key experiences, I heard therapy, resources, books that have helped you dive back into introspection in order to then look ahead and look at things that you can control. I heard community, and for you, that was church, which also offered opportunity for resources, new resources, and interactions with people who have similar values, almost to keep us on track, right? It gives us an opportunity to return to ourselves and return to others to try to be our best selves moving forward. You mentioned Parker Palmer a few times. I love the idea of the inner voice. As our lives change, our inner voice can change. So, how does one listen for their inner voice and discern that as such as their calling or their true self?
So I thought about this a little bit because I think inner voice is a metaphor for the part of us we want to listen to. And discerning that isn't easy. Meditation's never been on my list of effective things, but I know it is for others. Um, Journaling, I'm using your word, is clearly something I do. making less, just consciously setting a time aside to be introspective and thinking about what went well, what didn't go well, and what I could change. That brings out the inner voice, even if I'm not asking it a question, just spew out what happened and get ready to think and talk about it with someone else or with ourselves. But that means, again, being calm, especially for me, finding a time when I'm not emotional, because it's not the emotional voice that I want to listen to. I don't think inner voice is something you do once. It's a pattern over time. And looking at what works is just as important as looking at what you're unhappy with. The inner voice is there when you're introspective.
There are two things that jumped out at me in addition with what you just said. One, the inner voice is the voice that you want to listen to. Sometimes the voice that we hear most often is the voice of worry and negativity and frustration. And sometimes we get caught in a loop. But you're talking about calming oneself, whether it be calming one's body in order to calm one's mind. But the voice that we want to listen to is very different, And you also said it's a pattern, and sometimes it's a practice. The more we practice listening to that voice that we want to hear, or acknowledging, just saying, that's the one I want to listen to, the more it will appear, the more that it will become a practice, a pattern. That's beautifully said. Thank you, Jim. Beautifully said.
The lists, I think, are an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think of them as a habit, but a practice or pattern, just getting into that routine, doing things that enable you to at least some days be more introspective. It doesn't need to work every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point that you mentioned from Parker Palmer is that when you feel that one door is closing, another door opens. So honoring this moment of change in your life, I guess every point in life could be a moment of change. Honoring this moment of change, what door do you feel is closing and what one is opening for you? What are you moving toward now?
There are lots of ways to answer that. I think the thing I am most aware of that's closing is getting older. It's making travel harder. I'm backing out of going to friends' weddings and, traveling on a plane is doable. It's not the wheelchair that's makes it more work, and but there's so many other things about getting older that make travel hard. So that makes it harder to connect, and so I have to think about connecting through cards and emails, and that isn't the same. I'm more aware of right now something on the opening side that's obvious is all my friends are getting old, and they're going through many of the things that I went through a long time ago. And I've gone through cancer and stroke, both of which are life threatening, and now all my friends are going through that. And that's been a new opportunity to connect. We have a more common experience in coping with the risks and uncertainties. But so that's been, I've enjoyed that I can be a better friend sometimes.
Mm.
But I think also this whole experience working with you and uh, Stroke Onward and other stroke organizations has made me realize that while I help students and I love that, I can also think more about helping others through my stroke experience. So we'll see. There are more decisions. Doors may open, but I have to decide which ones to walk through.
It looks like you have a lot of doors opening around you. So what does Jim
yeah.
Dana version 3, 4, 5 have time for? Yeah, you have a lot of talent, a beautiful presence about you. You're very contemplative in the way that you sit and listen. You listen well, you ask good questions. And you mentioned that students often approach you as a mentor. And it doesn't surprise me at all because you beautifully hold space for people and listen. And you're honest about your own experience. And that is hard to come across. And when someone is honest about ways that they feel they can be better or things that are challenging to them, and they're still making choices to become a better version of themselves, that's admirable. It shows each of us that we have hope to become a better version of ourselves. Jim Dana version 3, 4, 5 has a lot to offer this world. There are many doors, but it's your choice.
In a lot of cultures, elders are wiser. And I think that's really about having more experience that they can use to share and relate to other people.
Mm. And you are an elder in terms of a stroke survivor, too, being able to look back in that way. You closed your story with, I don't know if this advice would have helped me 29 years ago. I might have been too stubborn, but perhaps Jim Dana version 2 would have listened. And that so beautifully sums up what you just said, and that you've been through it, and there are times you have been too stubborn, and you acknowledge that. And all of us battle things like stubbornness in our daily lives. And perhaps each of us in the new version of ourselves will learn to listen to our inner voice and to the wisdom of others. So thank you for sharing, Jim. Thank you for our time together over these past months. I really have felt blessed to have this opportunity to ponder life with you and talk deeply about our human experience, about our stroke experience. And I really admire the way that you move in this world. So thank you, Jim.
I'm going to add that I feel the same way. That this has been that working with you and listening to some of the Beyond Stillness stories and interviews that have done really had huge impacts on me and my desire to tell my own story and to share and to think about new ways to help others because you're an inspiration.
You're an inspiration, Jim. You have a lot to give, and you are giving in all aspects of your life right now. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for all the work you've done and still have to do.
Thank you for listening to part 2, Jim Dana's interview. For the full story, please listen to part 1, Jim Dana's story.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org. Another way to support is to like, share, or subscribe to our weekly show.
Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. Jim Dana reminds us that we have the choice to embrace change and live with intention. We hope his journey inspires you to keep exploring who you are and who you can become. Remember, as part of the stroke community, you are more than supportive. You are inspirational. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review to help others find our stories too. To support more stroke survivors in articulating and sharing their journeys, please consider donating to Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke. Together, we amplify diverse voices of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope.